Okay, zoning board, you are live, you are recording, phone lines are open, you are good to go.
Thank you, Matt, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of East Hampton Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for March 15th, 2022. We'll get going. We have one canceled public hearing this evening, and that is People's United Bank at 351 Montauk Highway in East Hampton, Suffolk tax map number 300-189-01-02. That has been canceled. So with that, we're going to move on to our next scheduled public hearing. And that is, the applicant is Stephen and Fiona Silver at 60 Seabreeze Lane in Amagansett, Suffolk, tax number 300-175-07-28. And the applicant is Stephen and Fiona Silver. Size and location is 29,834 square feet at 60 Seabreeze Lane in Gansett Dunes, Lot 30, map 6639. In Amagansett. The description is to demolish all existing structures and to construct a 4,487 square foot residence with 1,430 square foot attached garage, extended driveway, 944 square feet swimming pool, 50 square foot of pool house, approximately 1,700 square foot of decking, 1,482 square foot of patio, outdoor showers, stairs, walkways, light wells, retaining walls, and a new IA sanitary system within setbacks on a parcel of land containing wetlands, dune land, and beach vegetation. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to section 255-420 of the East Hampton Town Code, and one variance is required for this application. One variance of 14.2 feet is required from 255-430 of the Town Code in order to allow the proposed retaining wall to be constructed 85.8 feet from freshwater wetlands where 100-foot setback is required and any other relief necessary. The zoning district is A residence zone, X flood zone. The seeker class is type 2. And council, do we have a proper affidavit of service and posting?
Maybe on mute.
Jen, is council
Sorry
there?
about that. There you go. Hi. Sorry.
That's all right.
I have a affidavit of service and posting that reflects that the mailing and the posting were done on the 4th of March of 2022, and the paperwork appears to be in order.
Great. Who is handling this tonight, Tim? Is it you?
Member Berger.
Okay, Terry, I know you guys split it up. Thanks to you guys for helping out. This was a busy Amagansett evening. So Terry, you want to go ahead?
So I started out on the Seabreeze Lane portion in the cul-de-sac, and I'm looking at a survey, by the way, of dated September 30th, 2021, which I believe is the latest. So it was properly posted down at Seabreeze. That structure behind it is not actually on the applicant's property. You can see some of the dune vegetation farther over, and you'll see a little more of that. This is an incredibly steep topography, and I'm going to be walking up the driveway that it's existing today, and then there's a whole series of steps to go up with a lot of shrubbery on either side. So this is the driveway entrance, and that's the house in the distance that you can see. I'm going to walk up the driveway, and this is a shot of, actually before I walked up the driveway, okay, this is a house. I took some shots of the other houses in the neighborhood, the house next door and Tyler next. This is the house immediately next door to the south of the applicant's home. And next, this is another shot of the neighboring houses. This is all down on Seabreeze Lane at this point. Next. And that's just a shot of the cul-de-sac in general with some of the look of it as you leave the cul-de-sac. Next. Okay, now I'm starting to go up the driveway, and you can just, this is in the direction generally of where the wetlands are behind the shrubbery. Next. And just another shot a little closer up that you can see from the distance of the house in question. Next. And now this is the little bump out area for the parking, and you can see a house to the east in this. And again, this is roughly in the area slightly southeast of here is where the wetlands exist. Next. So I'm continuing to walk up. I'm trying to get an effect of the topography, which is very steep. Just another shot. Next. Pretty soon I'll be getting to the steps. Okay, we're at the steps, and there's a series of steps going up. This is the first shot, and then next. This is slightly higher, and I keep taking a shot of the house as I'm approaching it. Next. Another shot of the house through the vegetation from the steps that are about halfway up. And next, I turn slightly to take another shot to give you an idea of the topography again. This is toward the east. Next. And that's a shot. There were some posts there that I assume indicated some of the property line. And you could see a structure in the distance there, which I believe is a neighbor to the eastern side, northeast. Next. Now I'm at the top of the steps. And I immediately turn toward the west, and this is the existing pool that is there today. And then I'm going to continue up toward the back of the house. There's a deck there that you can see, but there's no access to it from outside of the house. Next. Now I just turned toward the house and took a shot of as much of it as I could get. You can see it's a quite vertical. It looks very large. But next, and that's just another shot. You can see the peak of it. Next. Now this is a gate. I'm still on the east side of the house, and the house is on my left. And I'm going to walk through the gate, and this is leading up to the Bluff Road portion of the property. This property extends all the way up to Bluff Road with another driveway area up there. Next. So from there, again, I took another shot of the neighbor to the east. Next. And there was another notice of posting on Bluff Road, so that shows that was also properly posted. And you can see some mature trees. But next. Now I just took a shot across the street on Bluff Road of the neighboring houses that are there today. Next. And this is a shot of the applicant's house, give you a better feel for the front, I guess, of this house. And another shot from the Bluff Road area. And you can see the vista out on the western side of that. And I'm going to be going down there. Next. It's a closer shot, actually, that shows that. And it does show a mature oak, a nice oak. That's right in the front of the house there. And then I'm going to go down the side through the gate there. Next. Now, this is the western side now, and the vista to the home to the west of the applicant's property. I'm going to go down through the gate and go down there. Okay, can skip that. We had that already. Next. And this is just a closer shot. This is the western side of the house as it exists today with the outdoor shower. And next. Now standing down at the level, not quite where the pool is, and I'm looking down. This is another view of the house to the west of the applicant's home, and you can get an idea of the topography. The next shot, I believe, shows that. Okay, that shows the western side of the house. Next. Okay, here I was standing on the edge, and you can see how steeply this drops off and toward the neighboring properties. Next. And it's another shot on the western side for the project fencing. I don't know if that's for the neighbor's house, maybe. Next. And another shot down into the, toward the Seabreeze Lane area from that, basically from that same spot. And next, I don't know if there's another one. And another shot, also, a little more southeasterly direction on that, again, to show the neighboring houses and the steep topography of this property. Next. And that's just a shot of the deck that was not accessible from, just to give you a shot of the way where that is today with above the pool area. Next. And, okay, I thought I got rid of that one. Next. And okay, again, this is back on Bluff Road, some more, and then this is the driveway that exists on Bluff Road today. And there is a proposed driveway also up here in the plan for the redevelopment. Next. And this is another shot. I was curious, this number 49, I don't know if this house has two addresses or if that means anything, if it does. But just another shot of that from Bluff Road. Next. Oh, that may be the last one. Yeah.
Thank you. Board members, any questions for Terry? And if not, I'll ask the applicant to step in. Who do we have here? Is it Joel or Andy? Who's on this?
It should be Joel.
Joel, are you in? You're in mute? Yeah,
I keep muting and unmuting. Oh my God, I'm a Luddite. I apologize.
I did the same thing, Joel.
Good evening, Chairman Gam.
How are you,
Delete,
Andy?
members of the board. Hope everybody's well tonight. I'm here tonight. I have Joel with me, representing Steve and Fiona Silver. They're the owners of 60 Seabreeze Lane. Several members of CAS A Architects on the line, as well as I see Sean Madigan, who's on Zoom. It looks like he's in a booking photo right now, but he's also here with me to answer any questions. I would say that, I think Terry's photo montage are great because I feel like I was at the property. One thing I want to point out is that, the front of this house is actually on the Seabreeze Lane side as per the subdivision. And I think you can see how awkward the topography makes the access to this property. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in terms of the design that was ultimately arrived at, is a way to actually provide an effective entrance into this property from the Seabreeze Lane side. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with Seabreeze. It's a parallels Bluff Road basically to the south. There's a lot of new redevelopment applications, some of which are in front of this board, some of which probably haven't appeared before the board. It is an area that's characterized by very large homes, large accessory structures, which I think is actually noticed in the TAM document. Our proposed redevelopment, all things considered, would essentially be pretty typical based on some of the adjacent properties and the way they're developed. This property was part of a clustered subdivision. Cluster subdivisions allow for much larger reserved areas. In this case, it's a 16-acre reserve, which is much farther south on the other side of Seabreeze. And this is allowed by creating reduced lot sizes below zoning requirements. Basically, creating more intensely developed residential lots is a trade-off for larger contiguous reserved areas. The subdivision was approved in 1978. That's prior to the Town Comprehensive Plan of 1984 that adopts the zoning code that most of us are more or less familiar with. But had this not been a cluster subdivision, this lot would have had a lot area that would have been at least 40,000 square feet. That's about 25% larger than the existing lot as required by zoning, the A residence. And all the lot coverages that we're going to be speaking about today would have been correspondingly reduced by 25% as well. The clustered nature is entirely relevant based on the planning department assertion that our proposal is an aggressive redevelopment of the existing improvements. In fact, the reason why this was subdivision was clustered was to create this more intense development of approved residential lots that are smaller than they would be ordinarily. So any comparison between the existing structure, which I would consider likely underdeveloped by today's standards at a 2,172 square foot house, these properties, it's certainly modest by today's standards as well. These properties are selling for millions of dollars. I don't think there's any probative value with that whatsoever with respect to what's appropriate on this property. The original owner who built this house, it was, probably had the intent to have a very small house on a lot that could have accommodated a much larger house.
Amy, let me just ask you a question though. How do you compare from the original part of this, and now we have an NRSP that we have to consider? So what you're saying is like, the original intent is now superseded by an NRSP, is it not?
I would say so, but I do think that one of the purposes of having NRSPs is to provide protection and natural features. The reason we have this lot at this size in this location is because the planning board and the town code allowed them to cluster and to protect more of the natural features that they deemed worthy of protection, which happens to be the reserved area south of this. I think it is entirely relevant in terms of the board's consideration, because the reason this is a smaller lot in this location is this subdivision created a much larger contiguous protected zone south of this property that really encapsulated most of the duneland features that the town was looking to protect at the time. And what we have left is this house. When it was built, there were no limits on any of the criteria we're going to be discussing tonight. However, it was built at a fairly modest size. I consider a 2,100 square foot house that would be perfect for my family. However, if I purchased this lot in today's market, I would think that would be, underdeveloped under the standards of the neighborhood, certainly. I do think another defining point to consider is the jurisdictional limit of the board. This property is part of essentially a moraine landform, not a terminal moraine, but a moraine from a glacial. The upper reaches of the property of soil types that are associated with glacial deposits. The lower reaches of the property, and that's where the duneland formations and wetland features are, have soil type contain vegetation and soils that are within the board's jurisdiction, defined from the wetland edge extending up 150 feet. That would essentially encapsulate any existing beach vegetation or duneland on this property. So in actuality, 80% of the gross floor area of the house, as well as the sanitary system along Bluff Road, are entirely out of the purview of this application. The removal of portions of the existing house and pool, however, are in jurisdiction, and so is the proposed construction of the new swimming pool, accessory structures, including the garage that are attached to the principal structure, as well as a total of about 526 square feet of actual GFA incorporated within this connection. Essentially, what Terry pointed out is the steepness. The reason this was kind of designed in this fashion was to facilitate an indoor access that didn't require this large exterior staircase. The existing house was constructed shortly after the subdivision was filed. The pool was approved by this board separately in 2008. In fact, most of the houses were built prior to 1984. As a matter of fact, if you look at the 1984 aerial, almost all of this area is developed. I think I saw 3 vacant lots in 1984, but they were all developed at that point with large houses, swimming pools, etc. Our current proposal essentially proposes to use the existing limits of the house and structure as our footprint for the new residence and proposed structures. I think if you look at the surveys and the sanitary plans, there also is a side-by-side comparison of the structures that I can have Sean perhaps address briefly when I'm complete. The proposed structure lines up with the front of the existing swimming pool. The only portion of the structure that is south of this line is a small corner of the garage and the proposed retaining wall. There was never an intent to disturb more of the lot than the existing residents already had, and it would be comparable in, the effort and cut and fill that would have been required to construct this residence would probably have been comparable to the proposed in many respects. I don't really know what the topography was before they constructed this, but it would have been done without any safeguards that we're proposing to undertake to protect the adjacent beach vegetation, as well as the wetland located in the southeastern extent of the property. Paramount importance in the design that Kevin O'Sullivan proposed was compliance with the town code. It's no easy task on a lot based on the configuration, the slopes, and the efforts to constrain our building envelope to within the existing disturbed area of the residence. Basically, it's designed these, like a kind of like a wedding cake to provide continuity and remain compliant with the number of story limitations, the pyramid lines, as well as setback lines, as well as setbacks from the wetlands. The final product that's in front of the board is in fact fully compliant with every metric of the town code and every regulation it requires, other than the small section of the retaining wall that you'll see adjacent to the garage that's noticed for a variance tonight. We did discuss doing away with this retaining wall, or at least reducing it to meet the setbacks, but I think it's probably a beneficial structure that would have otherwise no interaction with the wetlands. There's no detriment from the structure to balance against its benefit, and it's proposed in a section of the existing driveway. Basically, I think the benefit from it, has no counterbalance detriment, so I think it meets the variance standards. I can easily summarize the TAM. The staff seems to conclude the residence is just too large. However, this conclusion is unaccompanied by factual statements that accurately describe how the size of the residence could potentially affect the wetlands. Most of the extent of excavation required from the foundation is an area well outside of jurisdiction, and as a matter of fact, the only 526 square feet of gross floor area of the structure, less than 12% in total, are within NRSP jurisdiction at all. What is actually in jurisdiction are the accessory structures, including garage, the pool. The size of the house is frankly not really relevant, as most of it's outside of our NRSP regulatory distances. And you can even see the yellow portion would be entirely outside of jurisdiction. That's where most of the excavation will be conducted, and that obviously would be accessed from the Bluff Road side. I would say that when you total it all up, we have about 3,600 square feet of total lot coverage within the NRSP's area, plus the existing driveway and parking area that's down there as well. It's about 7,700 square feet. And I'm getting these numbers from the architect. Maybe we can, if you have further follow-up questions, he can address them in more detail, as well as obviously the demolition and construction of these structures, or at least a portion of the demolition of the existing residence. Given the task of demonstrating compliance with the NRSP standards, I don't think this is a really heavy lift. We've submitted a detailed construction protocol prepared by Rayner Group, spelling out important protections, as well as construction techniques that were proposed to ensure that the valuable NRSP-related portion of the property are protected. They include wire-back siltation fencing, temporary stormwater management practices. Those are all shown on a drawing labeled CP1 in the protocol, as well as plans for removal of fill and excavation that are designed to protect the beach vegetation and wetland features in an area that we have no plans to disturb. From a development perspective, we're proposing building all new structures within nearly the exact footprint of the structures we're removing, in a location that meets or exceeds wetland setbacks, excluding the lone retaining wall that I already mentioned. We comply with all required setbacks, coverages, gross floor area limitations, pyramid regulations, and we will take all necessary precautions to ensure that fill is excavated, most of which can be removed from Bluff Road, will not disturb or despoil any of the protected natural features to the southeast that are important to both this owner as well as to the town. I would also just point out that because this is a clustered subdivision, those numbers or those coverages are sort of artificially low because the lot is reduced below what zoning would require. In fact, there is no plan to disturb the area of the southeast of the property at all. I did want to draw your attention to a vegetative analysis that we submitted. It was done by Bill Miller and Associates, and it characterizes the existing vegetation, and it divides the property into zones for this purpose. There's frankly not a lot of native vegetation to be protected in the area that is the closest proximity to the wetlands, it looks like it could benefit from a management plan to address the prevalence of invasives such as black pines, Russian olives, and honeysuckle. There are some nice native occurrence in there as well. There's clearly an intent to restore the areas that will have to be disturbed to remove the existing residents, as well as to construct the new one with vegetation superior both in terms of habitat, soil retention, and drainage. We're willing to develop this plan with input from the planning and natural resource departments. I think it can only improve the aesthetics, drainage, and habitat available on the slope after construction is completed in a manner superior to what exists today. I also did want to briefly draw your attention to a letter of support that was submitted by the owner of 56 Seabreeze. That's the parcel directly to the west of the project that would have the most direct impacts from construction activity. The property adjoining to the west actually takes access off of Mako Lane. Our access would be at the terminus of Seabreeze. Essentially, once you get to that portion of Seabreeze, we're sort of the west. East. The property to the east takes access off of Mako. So if you look at the actual maps, you'll see that we're kind of the terminus of Seabreeze. So the most direct impact would be that adjacent neighbor who submitted a letter of support. If you have any questions, I did want to get him to Sean if he has any important things to add. But other than that, I'm available.
Board members, anybody have any questions? I might have one or two, but I'll postpone to hear what you guys have to ask.
Terry?
Okay, well, yeah, I have a couple of comments. Going back to the TAM, how many bedrooms are going to be in this new home?
I believe it's proposed as a 6-bedroom residence. The sanitary system that is proposed to be installed, which once again is outside of the board's jurisdiction, even the TAM recognizes that, is an 8-bedroom system. And I think the reason they're proposing that is it's a matter of good practice to oversize your sanitary system, especially on seasonally occupied residences. Usually, you want to provide for extra capacity for guests, et cetera, during seasonal activity. However, it is an oversized system, but I think that's because the contractor, the owner, and the architect believe that's a prudent step to take, particularly when you would not have to replace it. It might add to the useful life of the structure.
And how many of those bedrooms are included in that GFA number? Are all 6 in there?
Yes, absolutely. They would have to be. And keep in mind that the bedrooms on a plan versus deemable bedrooms from the health department sometimes are different calculations, but I can let Sean address that probably better than I can.
Okay.
Just for a point of clarity before we move on, we're saying that it's out of jurisdiction, and I'm willing to say that yes, pertaining to the wetlands, Andy, but this is an area of also duneland and beach vegetation, which is in jurisdiction. So we have to look at that.
If you could pull up that previous.
Joel, are you in, Joel?
Okay, I would say that if you look at the vegetation analysis, the boxes and squares, Area B is where the beach vegetation is predominantly located on this property. And in terms of the other jurisdictional limits, the TAM itself recognizes that it's out of jurisdiction in the north, in that corner of the property as well. There is no occurrence of beach vegetation. As a matter of fact,
but we spent some time, or you spent some time comparing back to the original. And with all due respect, the original was all beach and dune vegetation. So, I understand we're looking at an area B now, but that's a result of development. And I'm sure, and I agree that it's approved development at that time. But if we're going to compare back to the original was all beach, dune and beach vegetation.
Look at the soil. I think if the beach vegetation would perhaps be more properly characterized. We did a soils report that was submitted as part of this, and these are Carver soils, which are moraine soils. They're not associated with beach vegetation. So there is an engineer's report that details the soil types on this, and the predominant beach vegetation soils actually happen to be in Area B. The rest of the site are Carver soils, loam, I forget what, a Carver pumice series, which are associated with marine. So I don't think that this was all beach vegetation in 1978. But, the soils don't indicate that it would be, that would have been a predominant beach type. I think this is a transition zone. And even looking at Terry's photos, as you look across the street, there's no beach vegetation on Bluff Road. So at some point, this transitions to the beach soils. I think in 1978, when the subdivision was approved, it was recognized, well, that area is much further south. That's why they created the 16-acre reserved area that contains most of them. However, the southern or southeast extreme of this property is probably where that transition occurs.
Okay. Thank you. Terry,
May I make a
comment on that area B? That area B, there's very nice dune vegetation in there as you go through it, as well as that wetland. I thought I had a better shot of it. It just didn't show up well on the shot off the driveway. But it's very nice beach vegetation and dune vegetation. I'm also concerned about the runoff, even though your excavation may be some of the excavation may be out of jurisdiction. I'm concerned about the impact that will have on the areas running south and down toward the Seabreeze Lane part of the property.
I would address your attention to the construction protocol as well. I believe there's also a drainage plan associated with the construction, but the protocol is where it details the temporary stormwater measures that are being implemented, and that's shown on that particular sheet. That shows how they're going to use the siltation mesh fencing to protect the downslope areas from any runoff. It's sheet PP1.
Anybody else have any questions?
I just want to point out, in looking at my concern is the significant amount of excavation for this project as proposed. And if you look at the clearing that exists now, it's 9,194. Proposed is 17,311, and permitted is 17,387. So that's a significant increase. And how would you not have a negative impact on the natural features? Because it is also a natural resource special permit.
I would say one thing that is missing from our submission is a re-veg plan that we'd be willing to develop with the town. We didn't submit one because we wanted to have the opportunity to present to the board. But if you re-veg, the area is disturbed through construction activities as well as from removal of structures. That clearing, maybe Sean could hop in on this particular issue. Is Sean Madigan available for?
Matt
He was. I saw his link there.
Matt, did you let them in?
All people in Zoom are logged in, and there is a person waiting in the phone lines, but there's last four digits are 7551. If that recognizes anybody.
I'm sorry, I don't know the number that he would be at, but if you could, I would like to let him in if it is Sean.
Mr. Chairman, let me let this caller in. Okay. So unmuting last four digits of 7551.
Hello, caller.
Hi, everyone. My name is Luke Barron, and I'm a partner here at COSA, the architects for 60 Seabreeze.
Okay. I'm sure you've been listening, and I'm sure you're probably here to answer the question. Before you do, I'd like to swear you in.
Of course.
You affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Andy, you want to go ahead, or?
Well, I was hoping that Luke could perhaps address the post-construction impacts in terms of clearing, et cetera, and what they envision for the site.
Sure. And I think, Andy, thank you for giving such a complete presentation so far. And thank you to the board for giving me the time to speak here. I think that when we talk about clearing calculations for new construction, it's not a hard and fast defined calculation. I would imagine that if we sharpen our pencils on this, we can shave a couple thousand feet off of the total clearing square footages. Because we have the access from Bluff Road and we do have the driveway on Seabreeze, we really don't need access along the eastern and western corridors of the property. I think you probably know that to pour a foundation, we only really need to overcut 3 feet on either side. So what appears like a fairly large clearing calculation for construction, we can definitely make much smaller. In terms of revegetation, we're open to anything that the board wants to recommend to us. I think that was one of the reasons why we felt the planting inventory from the arborist were so valuable, and also board member Berger's photographs, I think, really tell a picture of what's going on site, and that we're not really dealing with a site that is a pristine example of a dune property, while the southeast portion of the property is fantastic, as board member Berger points out. I would really love to see us extend that further north post-construction and also move over to the west side of the driveway as feasible. The report from the arborist really does a great job of detailing what is native and what is non-native and what's being choked out by invasive species. And our hope as an architecture firm is really for this property to be a model for successful and thoughtful development of a sensitive site. Andy pointed out earlier how we've terraced the property down the steep slope. That you'll see the photos really paint a good picture of how tall the house is right now. It really appears and reads as a 3-story building. And what we're going to have is something much more in keeping with the slope and much more lower profile. And the homeowner knows that he's giving up views that he could have if he kept the house.
Luke, with all due respect, to max out the clearing and then say that we didn't come or we haven't submitted it yet, I'm sure this board would have preferred you come with a proposal now so that we can work with that, but now we're working with 0. So the thing is, where do we go from here? We're not interested in hammering this out over time. We want to close this out and get this application moving. How do we move on further? Because essentially we're starting with 0 when you're maxing out the clearing. So to say, we're going to knock off a couple of thousand feet, that's arbitrary at this point. We should have started with a footprint.
I take your point to heart there, and I do think that the arborist report really does lay out a good starting point for revegetation.
But you're still maxing it out.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest
I'm not
if you
sure
allow
that's
us.
strictly true. I don't know if Andy was saying something to that effect.
But what I would like Mr. Chairman, is let us submit a post-construction clearing line, proposed clearing line, with calculations on that for you. I think we were, kind of detailing what is in the area. Some of the areas that are being cleared might not actually be cleared. I don't want to split hairs on this thing, but when you're talking about clearing out Russian olives and other invasives, I consider those areas cleared. I think the town would as well. But maybe we can put together a final assessment based on that arborist report, which for the record, we just got, I think it was Monday, it was provided to us. And that was a crucial. I
know, but this isn't your first dance. I'm just going to say this isn't your first dance, Andy. When we have a number in front of us and saying you're maxing out clearing on this, that's problematic to us. I thought that something, at the time you saw the TAM or even the posting, you would have raised that red flag.
Additionally, Mr. Chairman, they're pushing the envelope to close of the maximums on the GFA and all the measurable detail. And that's not even accounting for the NRSP. And then the excavation, I'm having trouble with this, the NRSP portion of this, with the aggressiveness of this.
Okay, so okay, is there any, or you're going to submit something, Andy, right? We're going to propose something.
Yes, I would like to submit
does that, I mean, again, I really strongly feel we're starting off with zero here. So do we have to take that to the public again? See, we don't have anything to go by when you're maxing out, when the number we have in front of us is maxing it out.
But it is a legal number, so I don't think it needs to be re-noticed, because we're going to reduce from what is permitted under the code to something that's going to be
an NRSP, though, right?
Pardon me, I'm sorry.
It is an NRSP, so we have to consider the NRSP factor.
A lot of the clearing here is outside of the NRSP jurisdictional lines, but I think we can provide an intelligent, now that we have a vegetative analysis, we can provide a realistic revegetation plan that will incorporate the vegetates into it, so that we can give you a better product, basically.
All right, so at the end of this, we'll have a discussion as far as your timing on that, and then we're going to have timing for the planning department to get back as well.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, there's also a very large retaining wall.
Yeah, I get it. Does anybody have any?
I can speak to the retaining wall a little bit. The presence of the retaining wall allows us to not have to do substantial regrading just south of the swimming pool. And so when we went back and forth on this, we decided, and I hope you agree, that that to not have to regrade sensitive areas outweighed the request for that sliver of wall to continue into the wetlands area.
I guess my question would be, if the project were tightened up a little bit at the top, would there be the same need for the retaining wall? But I would suggest we allow the planning department to comment.
Yeah,
I agree.
Sure. Well, we can tighten it up there, and I can remove the request for the variance for the retaining wall. I can, if we do that, I can shift the house, that southern edge of the house, about 8 feet further north. Right now, while that would end up with like 20% below allowable for our lot coverage. 5% reduction in the lot coverage, we'd end up with 23% below the allowable lot coverage by moving the southern portion of the house north 8 feet. It would also reduce our GFA by 6%, and it would, right off the bat, eliminate our clearing by 2%. But as I said earlier, we can get that clearing figure much further down. And to Andy's point, given how much of the plantings on this property are non-native and invasive, we should probably consider our clearing to be larger than stated as is. So if that is something that you as a board would find a little bit more palpable, then we're absolutely willing to take that to our client.
I'm not making a decision one way or the other. I just think that we don't have enough information in front of us tonight, because this falls under NRSP jurisdiction, how this is protecting the natural features. I mean, for me, I just can't go forward, because that's the most important thing to me, is protecting that.
I have to agree. I find this a very confusing application at this point. With all, we're talking about all things that haven't been presented, from the revegetation now to pulling the building back. This feels, quite frankly, a little disorganized to me.
I think we should hear from the planning department and make our decision based on
Okay, so Luke again. So as a zoning board member in Southampton Village, I do appreciate that it's difficult to look at applications like this. I think that hillside applications are particularly difficult. I think that in our package, some of the renderings tell a really good story of what the house looks like on site. But also to bring up Andy's previous point, a lot of how the site is going to be protected is very clear in the construction protocol. This is the application that we would love to have approved. I am offering you guys concessions and compromises in an effort to find a win-win and get this approved. So, I'm not going to obviously negotiate against myself and reduce the application when it took so long to have the planning board look at it. So I would love to talk about this property, but if we think that it's a non-starter, then I would like to talk about, marching orders from you guys and what may be more acceptable and what may be approvable to you.
Well, our process does not allow for that. I mean, it takes a while. I know to come here. We're not going to hold. I don't think we're at the interest of keeping this hearing open for a long time. I think we'll give you one shot to come back to us with a suggestion based on the comments made tonight. So that will grant you. But I don't think we're going to, just continue and try to negotiate a deal. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chair, we need to hear from the planning department and hear everything they have to say, and then base our decision on this proposal as is.
Sure. This is Tyler, I believe?
Yes, Tyler Morzak for the planning department.
Hi, Tyler. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So this application before the board is for approval to demolish the existing structures on the property and to construct a new 4,487 square foot two-story residence with an attached garage, to extend the existing southern driveway, construct a new swimming pool house, decking, patio, outdoor shower, stairs, walkways, light wells, retaining walls, and a new IA sanitary system. The proposed retaining wall will require a 14.2-foot variance to be located 85.8 feet from the freshwater wetlands on the southeastern side of the parcel, and the majority of the project is within NRSP jurisdiction of the same wetlands, while the northern portion is outside of jurisdiction. The proposed project represents an aggressive redevelopment of the existing improvements on this parcel. Excuse me. It more than doubles the coverages and gross floor area. It requires a significant amount of excavation in order to construct the proposed improvements. And it proposes to clear to nearly the maximum allowable for this property. The planning department feels that this application fails to meet the NRSP standards and should be reduced in scope in order to reduce the impacts that the project will have on the surrounding natural features. The relevant coverages are listed in the assessment, but overall, they represent significant increases in clearing and development to nearly the maximum allowable. The project is large in scope in nearly every metric that the board normally utilizes to evaluate applications. The residence is more than doubling in GFA and is proposed to be nearly the maximum sized residence allowable on any lot in East Hampton of this lot area, regardless of the presence of surrounding natural features. While the neighborhood is characterized by larger developments, the proposed residence is a significant increase over the existing improvements on a sensitive lot with a significant topography and has the potential to create negative impacts on the surrounding natural features. In addition to the size of the improvements, a significant amount of excavation is required in order to construct the proposed improvements. The construction protocol does not appear to give a detailed analysis of cut and fill calculations. However, it does mention the need to remove 1,000 cubic yards of soil for the foundation and the removal of 200 cubic yards for final grading. The proposed project will require significant excavation and installation of a retaining wall, which reaches up to 12 feet in height at its maximum. The applicant appears to have proposed a residence which is set back into the steep slope on the parcel with a tiered design as to not need a third-story variance or height variance. The project was also designed to comply with the town's pyramid regulations, utilizing glass railings in areas that would have otherwise been non-conforming. This tiered design also contributes to the significant excavation, with the lower levels of the residence being below grade on the north side of the property. The lowest portion of the residence is proposed at an elevation of approximately 13 feet, with the top of the roof at the highest point at an elevation of approximately 60 feet above sea level, with a 3-foot glass railing above that deck. This tiered design is going to create a large structure which will require significant amount of excavation and regrading, which will impact the surrounding natural features as the face of the hillside is changed. The project is also calling to clear to nearly the maximum clearing limits. Significant amount of clearing was required within NRSP jurisdiction, much of which is cleared on the steep slopes of the property. This clearing will reduce the natural runoff control that the vegetation provides and negatively impact the wetlands, which are downhill from the proposed clearing. Overall, the proposed project represents a fairly aggressive redevelopment of a unique property which contains significant topography and beach vegetation, dune land, and freshwater wetlands. The board should examine this application closely to determine if it meets all the applicable standards and that it is in keeping with the board's past practices. The project could certainly be reduced in scope in order to allow for reasonable use of the property while better protecting the natural features within jurisdiction. Reducing the size of the improvements, the coverages associated with those improvements, and overall clearing would reduce the impacts that the proposed project has through increased runoff and overall disturbance. The board may want to discuss what additional mitigation measures would be appropriate given the scale of construction proposed. And just to go over a few points that were brought up, it was mentioned that a lot of the residence is outside of jurisdiction, so the size may not be a huge determining factor, but the size of that residence pushes more of this project onto that steep slope and into jurisdiction. So I feel that even though some of it's located outside of 150 feet, the size of it does bear onto the rest of the project, even that which is outside of jurisdiction. And it was mentioned that about the reserved area being created to protect the natural features, and that was at a time before natural resource special permits even existed. But that's also the purpose of the natural resources special permit, is to protect those natural features that weren't protected in the easements that were created at the time of the subdivision. And that was part of the creation of the subdivision, is setting aside areas in order to divide that large property into smaller lots. And as was sort of already mentioned, that weighing of having a retaining wall or regrading and which one would be more impactful or not does also raise questions as to the scale of the project in general and the need to regrade the face of that hill there. Other than that, I can answer any questions you might have.
Tyler, just your comment regarding the different soil types. Because when we talk about jurisdiction, we're talking about jurisdiction to wetlands. But as far as the dune vegetation, dunes, what about that? And Andy's and the presentation that is out of jurisdiction from that as well.
Much of the north side of the property, or like around the existing residence, is long been disturbed. So I would imagine that the clearing limits are probably greater than the 9,000 number that's listed. But certainly anything south of the swimming pool is in duneland soils, according to the soil survey, Suffolk County Soil Survey, and contains duneland vegetation. So all that clearing south of the existing improvements, and certainly south of the fence that's on there, is all duneland vegetation.
Thank you. Any questions for Tyler?
Nothing additional from me.
Okay.
I wanted to make a comment. I'm sorry. I was on.
What?
Tyler?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was on mute and I was talking away. Tyler, I'm looking at the drainage plan. I see that note that says cannot accommodate drainage and wetland setback. And so the only two outlets for surface water there are up very close to the garage and then one down very close to Seabreeze Lane. This is a fairly large increase in hardened area with this driveway. What's your comment about that? I mean, we're going to be gathering up a fair amount of rainwater here with only one dry well a considerable distance from each other. I look at this and I wonder, how we're going to accommodate that amount of runoff. And then just in coordination with that and everything that everyone's been saying, when you look at the area that's immediately below the pool, we can't possibly consider this project without knowing what's going to happen between the pool and the wetlands. This is an area where that planting plan is absolutely critical. That's a comment.
As far as the drainage calculations are we rely on the engineers doing the calculations essentially. So if they feel that they've adequately they calculate the surface areas. I don't know if there's any arguing against their calculations of the surface areas and rainfall calculations. They account for, the northern portion of the driveway, which is the new section of the driveway, and then seem to be adding one on the southern section where it sort of slopes down towards Seabreeze Lane at that point in time. So I don't know if there's much expertise that I can offer, at least on the drainage plan.
But that relies on the water that's captured on that driveway making its way all the way down to that lower drain.
Right. Yeah. The driveway would certainly have to. Well, at least the upper section, the new section, would need to slope, which should be able to be done. But the southern section, which is the existing section, does sort of slope in that general direction, although it's not designed to be set in there, unless they're redoing the whole driveway, which I don't believe is the plan.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, Andy, we'll go back to you. Well, somebody else have a question?
Well, I'm curious about they say the construction is going to be done from the Bluff Road area, and there's going to be a cul-de-sac, a new driveway. There's one that exists today. If they're redeveloping this, is that permitted by the subdivision? Is there any restriction on that? I don't know whose question that is, Andy, I guess.
Truthfully, I'm not familiar with the original subdivision. I didn't represent the owner when they purchased this property. However, I do know that if you look at the aerial, pretty much every residence on the Bluff Road side has a parking lot from the Bluff Road side. So I would assume that we had COs, everybody's had COs issued on these properties. So I'm assuming that it is in fact an allowable access. I did want to address the drainage issue that Ed had mentioned. I think if you look at that drainage plan, you'll see there's actually a series of 6 pools. The only area that wasn't proposed to have drainage installed, where it says drainage cannot be accommodated within wetland setback, is an area that it's basically a gravel driveway, and we weren't proposing to install storm drains. I think we probably could if the board, if you wanted us as part of a resubmission to, provide for drainage. I think it's 206 cubic feet of drainage area, as they would explain it. But I think you probably could install some dry wells in that area and pick up what is, that's the existing condition on a pervious driveway. But I don't think it's going to be a huge contributor because it is pervious. So, it's not a paved area that we're picking up, but there are significant dry wells on that drainage plan, as well as a call out of the different areas with the calculations in terms of how you, accommodate the stormwater that's proposed to be generated from there. Also, I did want to mention the clearing to the south of the pool. If you look at this plan particularly, you'll see there's barely any clearing south of that pool. I can't imagine that the clearing that is existing and would be needed to actually remove that pool, as well as some of the structures, it would be, you're not going to require additional clearing, but you also can't, so I think basically that's kind of a static line on the drawing in terms of the existing clearing. Is it possible to reduce some of the driveway areas, et cetera? Yes. And I think that's what we would ask the board for an opportunity to look at, to see where we could come out and getting our clearing numbers a little bit better. I do think, I don't know if we would be able to realize the exact clearing limitations of the existing property, somewhere like 9,900 square feet off the top of my head, versus where we are today. But I think we're going to be pretty close to there, because this property is, there's no intent to really have expansive lawn areas, we were pretty tight on our clearing lines south of that existing swimming pool. Most of the areas along Bluff Road, and Bluff Road in general, are in fact cleared in grass. So, that's what we would ask the opportunity to try and address some of the board's concerns. Come back to you with what we think we can accomplish in a total clearing, maybe add some additional drainage in that one area. And perhaps, as I think Luke was mentioning, some other design ideas he had, let us get one bite at the apple for the board to kind of, now that we've heard all the board's concerns.
Thank you, Andy. What time do you think you need for that? Because I imagine you might need a little bit more time than the posting of the transcript. So,
I love to project time limits on something that I don't do. That's what my wife does when she looks at
they can always be extended if
but I perhaps defer to Luke. My wife thinks I can mow the lawn very quickly at any time. But Luke, what do you think is reasonable in terms of
stand by, please. I have to unmute him again. Okay, Luke.
Okay, thanks. We have architectural drawings ready to go for this. I would need to get with David Saskis and talk about clearing. And if you do want us to address additional drainage, like Tyler said, I think the drainage is adequate, but we can address that if you want. I need a week.
I would suggest more like...
Or you tell me when is the next posting deadline, and I'll meet it.
I would suggest tomorrow. 2 weeks, Your Honor.
You need to look at the scope of the entire project, not just drainage.
In terms of protecting the natural features, yes, I agree.
I think we have adequately heard the board's concerns, and my hope is that we could probably address all of it in one fell swoop. And I'll work with the architects to see what we think we can accomplish on a resubmission here. But I would suggest we would like to have at least 2 weeks to make this submission to the board, and hope most of this is drawing and CAD work, not field work. So,
okay, so then if we do that. I'd like to give the planning department 2 weeks. We might actually hit that deadline, Andy, if with the posting and so 2 weeks, and then I'd like the planning department to comment on that in 2 weeks. Is that okay with you, Tyler?
That works for me.
Okay.
I imagine that'll be right around when it's going to close anyways, so
That's
that might work
correct.
out just fine.
Just to be clear, though, are you talking about closing the public hearing and keeping the written record open, board?
That's
Are you
correct.
talking about a second hearing so that
We're
you
gonna close-
get public feedback from?
I think we should close the hearing and keep the record open.
Okay.
Yes, that's my opinion too.
I agree.
I concur with that as well.
So we're keeping the record open.
Excuse me, ZBA.
Yeah, I think you have a caller.
Mr. Chair, we do have one additional call I was trying to get to you.
All right. Thank you. You want to unmute them?
Okay. I'm going to mute first Luke, and I'm going to now unmute last four digits of 4221.
Hello, caller.
Thank
Are
you.
you part of this hearing?
Thank you for finding me. I am public comment, please.
Sure. State your name and your address, please.
Of course. My name is Jane Meering. I live at 32 Ocean Lane. I am not an expert on moraine glacial deposits, soils, nor am an arborist, nor am I an attorney.
Hold
Great.
on.
Can I swear you in then? Would you affirm to tell the truth,
Please.
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Before you hit the timing button, if you might indulge me with just like 1 extra minute on my time, because there was a lot of sort of unconventional horse trading tonight that I hadn't taken into account. Good evening, Chairman Deline and members of the Zoning Board. When I comment on a property before this board, I'd like to put in perspective where I live relative to it and how it's part of my existence. So here's the context for why I'm engaging in this public hearing tonight. This parcel fronts on Bluff Road, just 2 doors west of Mako Lane. The corner of Ocean Lane and Central Avenue, where I've lived for 20 years, is just 2 blocks east of Mako. All in, I experience 60 sea breeze several times daily from both Mako and the other 2 vantage points up on Bluff Road and down on Sea Breeze. But way more important than my individual experience is what will be the impact of this massive project on the broader Beachhampton Dunes community and Amagansett Hamlet. So first, I'd like to address the community character standard. Bluff Road is central to the character and identity of Amagansett. Though this section east of Atlantic is not included in the historic district, all of Bluff Road represents an iconic and historically significant viewshed. Looking over that bluff, across the lowlands, and out to the ocean vista in the distance. This public viewshed, as well as the north side of Bluff Road, have been meaningfully compromised over the last decade by a ton of redevelopment. But this proposed project appears to be of such an aggressive, out of context, and unprecedented magnitude that it seems to pose a whole new level of risk to our community and rural character. Getting more specific, my focus tonight is on 2 points. First is the extraordinary mass and scale of this project proposed to be set onto/into a fragile parcel that is materially non-conforming in size relative to A residence minimums. Second, the way it will devastate part of a crucial natural feature, the bluff, and obliterate such an extensive swath of valuable and increasingly rare natural resources. On the first point, the code-based statistics of GFA coverages and clearing ratios, of course, must be analyzed. But the point I want to stress is that in and of themselves, with respect to this application, those official stats vastly underestimate the true volume, intensity, and impact of what applicants want to do. As we know, the proposed new house would be more than double GFA to the headline number of 4,487 square feet, and building coverage just about triples. But that's only the beginning. Spending a bit of time with the building plans in the file, we see in addition to GFA, there's another 5,200 square feet of what is referred to as non-GFA internal usable space that actually includes 3 of the bedrooms, primarily the garage and the massive ground floor level they refer to as the basement. All in, GFA plus internal non-GFA adds up to house size of 9,700 square feet. But a complete analysis of scope and scale must also include all the outdoor living spaces and additional structures that will be developed as part of this residence. That adds up to another 5,800 or more square feet of living space and structure. Members of the ZBA, though it's not the code formal way of sizing it, this brings the cumulative living expanse and structural intensity of this residence to more than 15,000 square feet, tiered on 5 levels, cascading 50 feet down and drilled into the bluff. I'm not sure all that comports with the needs relief standard. Lastly, with respect to the environmental and natural resources impact, as Tyler Borsak has pointed out in the TAM, the excavation of this bluff proposed here looks to be without precedent in the area. This would, I assert, create a very dangerous and disturbing precedent. Also of huge concern, though they'll remove some invasive, is that total clearing will exceed 17,000 square feet. The currently undisturbed dunescape and wetlands around the bottom half of this parcel are essential to the integrity of this neighborhood and crucial to natural habitat. In closing, we have numerous areas that define Amagansett. It's Marine Boulevard, it's the Dunes, it's Bluff Road. They are named after our important defining natural features for a reason. When we put structures on them, when we have the privilege of shaping them to our needs and living on them, each of us has a responsibility to integrate with them, not dominate or destroy them. Respectfully, I ask the board to deny this application. But most of all, I genuinely appeal to the applicants as a community neighbor to rethink their desires in this context, and scale back. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Andy, we've gone long enough here, so I'd like to close this out. Do you have any final short closing comments, or are we good with I think we settled out, right?
Yeah, I think we settled out, and I did want to compliment the prior public caller. I thought that was an excellent points that were made. Some of them, I dispute, but I appreciate the input, and we'll certainly discuss that as well.
Thank you. Terry, then you want to make a motion? I guess we make our normal motion because we're expecting it all to be closed. Andy, if you do run into a problem, run into more time, you can always submit and ask for more time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let me see how we can get this in. I make a motion Stephen and Fiona Silver, 300-175-07-28 at 60 Seabreeze Lane in Amagansett. I make a motion to close the public hearing and leave the written record open for, we want a total of 4 weeks, 2 weeks for the applicant's agent to submit updated documentation, project information, and 2 weeks from that point for the planner to be able to review it. So do we close it in 4 weeks?
No, we can only close it after 2 weeks after they're posted, so.
After the
at same
post,
time.
yeah,
That's gonna- I think that's gonna rule.
whichever occurs first or whichever occurs last.
And Andy and Joel, please watch that time so we don't run into a problem there either.
And yes, 2 weeks for the applicant.
Well, be a little clear, are we doing 4 weeks for additional submissions and then the record officially closes 2 weeks after the transcript posts? Or are we
Yes.
doing the sooner?
Whichever comes second.
4 weeks, but only 2
Whatever
for the
comes
applicant.
second.
I think the framing of it is the greater of. So it's
Or the
either
later of.
2 weeks after the posting or 4 weeks total, whichever is greater.
Whichever's later, right.
Okay.
Yeah, we had one like
We
that.
we have a second
And
on
Laura,
that?
Laura, you got
I'll
that?
second.
I'll concur.
Concur.
Yep, I got it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
You guys.
Good night.
Moving on, we have Hillary Evans at 22 Broadview Road in Amagansett, Suffolk, tax map number 300-104-02-29.1. The applicant is Hillary Evans. Size and location is 213,026 square feet at 20 Broadview Road, Amagansett. The description is the placement of 200 cubic yards of sand, planting of beach grass, and erection of sand fencing on a property containing coastal bluffs, beaches, and tidal wetlands. A relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420 of the town code and any other relief necessary. The zoning district is A3 residence and the secret class is type 2. Council, do we have a proper affidavit of service and posting?
I have an affidavit of service and posting reflecting both mailing and posting on March 4th, 2022, and the paperwork appears to be in order.
Thank you. And do we have a report, board members? Who's handling this?
I do.
Thank you,
I
Tim.
do. Yep. I think Brian Frank will pull up this. There are three of us on the board that would recall this application very, very well because we were involved in the original decision of it. Brian, I think the first photo is of the posting, if I'm not mistaken.
There was no posting. There was no photo of the posting in the package I got from you, Tim.
You got 9 photos total, Brian, or no?
Yes.
You did. Okay. All right. Well, I believe this was the last photo. So I am actually down on the beach and facing south, essentially. So this gives you some sense of it. So I'll just follow your photos, Brian, and try to.
Yeah, they'll come up in the way they were labeled when they came over.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Tim, but just for the record, you did actually see a posting, though.
I did, and I have a photo of it, which I'll be happy to submit after this. I had thought that it was part of this submission, so
Okay. As long as you
the first
can
thing,
attest to it.
yeah, no, I did. It was properly posted. And the first thing I did was walk down the driveway to the property, but I quickly realized that there was very little to be gained given the state of vegetation behind this property. It was very difficult to get anything that would provide anything of value here. So we're now down in the parking lot that was referenced in the TAM, and I believe this would be the area that would be the access way should this be approved. Next photo. Okay, and so now I am facing, we're going to call this north. So I'm facing north. That is in the upper left of this photo. You can see the premises. And then there's several references. And then on our survey, which is dated, my latest one is December 6, 2021. There's a reference to the rock and wood groin. There are actually two of those, and we'll see those as we approach this a little bit more. Next photo. So again, you can see the residence sort of in the middle right of the photo here. But really the purpose of this was just to give a sense of the toe of the bluff and some of the erosion that is existing there now, which I think is the reason for this application. Next photo. And now I've just walked over and gone down along the fence line to give a little better perspective, again, of some of the erosion that's occurring along the shoreline. Next photo. Now I'm essentially right before the first groin, and you can see the second one in a distance, and the configuration of the other matter that's along the beach here. Next photo. Okay, so now I've walked. If you look on our surveys, you can see the sketch of the stairs. I believe the stairs will be in front of us in a separate matter later this evening. But this gives you a perspective of those stairs, and I believe the request is to complete that stairway down with a removable section that can be pulled back during a pending storm. Next photo. And again, we have some photos in our file of this, but just look at the bulkhead and the residue of the prior bulkheading that was part of this project. Next photo. Okay, and so again, now I've just gone really to the property line, and now I'm looking back to the south, just again to give that perspective. And I think that's the last one, Brian.
Correct.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody have any questions for Tim?
No.
If not, we'll go to the applicant.
Okay.
Rick, how are you, Rick?
Very good, Roy. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, council. My name is Richard Whalen. I represent, as an attorney, represent the property owner, Hillary Evans. This property is 22 Broadview Road in Amagansett. I will note we had two postings, actually. One was at the driveway entrance on Broadview Road, but we also posted the property frontage at the end of Albert's Landing Road on the parking lot. So there were two postings up. The property consists of a high bluff that fronts on Gardner's Bay, and it's really kind of the southeastern end of a ridge that terminates where the house is located. Very, very little of this property can be considered flat ground, almost none of it. Really a little triangular area, which is where the house is located. Everything else on the property is steep. There's a steep bluff going down to the beach on Gardner's Bay. And of course, from where the house location is found, there are steep slopes to the south and southeast in the woods. Those drop down to a freshwater wetland, which is in the reserved area of the Bell Estate Section 3 reserved area, and down toward the Albert's Landing parking area itself. And you can actually, very good exam, you can see the topo lines on the property right there. So it's all steep territory. There was only really one place to build on this. There were three, there have been over time, 3 different applications to build a house. I'm pretty familiar with the property because I was the zoning board attorney. Evans and her husband, Sal Graziano, purchased the property and applied to construct a house. And that time in 2018, all 3 occasions, of course, the zoning board did grant approvals and variances, but the third one was the charm. The house has actually been built. Keep in mind, for what it's worth, the subject lot is not in the Bell Estate Section 3 subdivision. This property was conveyed out by Dr. Bell to attorney Raymond A. Smith in 1953. What's unique about the property, and again, I'm speaking part here from my own personal knowledge, is that for decades, the toe of the bluff was stable right down to the back dune area. Possibly, and I would say probably, this is due to the protective effect of the groins and the bulkhead, or not a revetment, but bulkhead. Those date back to pre-1954. I don't know exactly when they were first installed, but they appear on aerial photographs all the way back to 1954. Consequently, for most of the 20th century, and even into the beginning of the 20th century, the toe of the bluff was basically forested right down to the beach. What has happened in recent years, though, probably in part because those erosion protective features are slowly breaking down, the bottom of the bluff is beginning to get undermined. And as the forested bluff gets undermined, our concern is that once that process gains momentum and as the undercut starts to advance up the bluff face, you might reach a point where it's difficult or impossible to stop it. And that forest literally begins to slide down or topple down the face of the bluff. That's why the sand replenishment is being proposed. There was a prior sand replenishment approval in May of 2020. I would note that was through an expedited NRSP. The applicant didn't receive the approval until June 10th of 2020, and therefore the project could not be undertaken until the fall of 2020. And that was like this one. That was for about 200 cubic yards of sand. There was actually a second replenishment done in the winter of 2021 under the original expedited permit. Again, that took place in the winter of 2021 after after a winter storm. So in no case to this point has the applicant actually been able to install sand and plant it. And in relation to that, I want to mention something that I will try to remember to bring this up at the end. The window for the applicant to actually do a complete coastal restoration on this project is incredibly short on the property. First of all, it's not advisable, in my opinion, it's not advisable to place sand on an east-facing coastal area before the end of April, because you can get east wind and storms right through the end of the month of April that will take away whatever you put there. So now you're into May. You can put down sand in May, but this is our access is over the Alberts Landing Road beach end. The town closes that to vehicular access. At least they told us we couldn't put vehicles on it after about the middle of June, when it begins to become lifeguarded. So from about the middle of June to middle of September, there's no vehicle access onto the beach. And if you want to plant, as you know, if you want to plant the sand that you put down, you've got to do that at the start of the summer or late spring. So we effectively have a window of the month of May and until the middle of June, until the town says, hey, we're lifeguarding the beach, you can't come on here anymore. So we might have 6 weeks a year in which we can actually get the sand in there and have time to plant it. So I ask you to bear that in mind. There is a scenic easement over the property, and this is kind of an interesting bit of confusion, I'll say. There was a scenic easement granted to the town by Kern and McFarland that resulted from the 1990 approval. Scenic easement was granted in 1991. After Fabian Barron and Thomas DiPaola got approval for their project in 2005, for some reason I cannot explain, and I was not the zoning board attorney at that point, the zoning board decision in 2005 says, grant another scenic easement to the town, even though they acknowledged that there was one. They didn't say it was to be any different, but in fact, the easement that was crafted and submitted and accepted in 2007 does differ in some respects from the 1991 easement. As far as this project is concerned, though, the placement of topsoil, the language in the two easements is essentially the same. It says no topsoil shall be removed from the burdened premises, nor shall sand, gravel, peat, or other minerals be placed thereon or removed therefrom. I don't think that impedes or prevents what we're proposing to do with the sand. The planning department agrees with me, and I having read the TAM, I do agree with the reasons, the rationale that's provided in the TAM by Brian Frank. The planning department says, and I'm pretty much quoting from the TAM here, restoration within scenic and conservation easements is not uncommon, and when properly implemented is consistent with the purposes of scenic easements, which are usually to conserve the features within the easement in their natural state in perpetuity. So I want to expound upon this a little bit with a short history, if you will, of scenic easements in the town. So scenic easements, the power for municipalities to take or accept scenic easements derives from New York General Municipal Section 247, which was adopted in 1960. The first time that the town or the town board or any of the town agencies really began to talk about accepting scenic easements is in the mid-1960s. And the first scenic easement that I'm aware of ever having been accepted in the town is in 1973. And do you know where that scenic easement is?
No, that's good.
Well, you don't know, but you actually do know where it is, although you don't know it. Because all of us have enjoyed it for many, many decades. It was on the Miller Farm in Springs, or it is on the Miller Farm in Springs. There were scenic easements on both sides of that road, but when you go up Springs Fireplace Road, you pass Talmadge Farm Lane on your left, you pass the Nature Conservancy's Merrill Lake Sanctuary, and now the Nancy Kelly Preserve on the right. The Martyrs have a place on the right, and then there's a view, or at least there was a better view until recently when the landowner began to plant a kind of a low hedge in front of it. But there's a field to your right, and you can see to Accabotic Harbor, and you all know what I'm talking about. Yeah. That's one of the Miller easements from 1973. So in the 1970s, the town attorney at the time was Dwayne Whelan. I presume that Dwayne Whelan was the fellow who adopted or drafted the first scenic easements. I mean, whether he worked off some sort of a template that was circulated throughout other municipalities, I don't know. But the language that we use today, much of the language used today, is essentially unchanged from the very earliest scenic easements. When I was in the town attorney's office in the early 1990s, I tweaked it a little bit. So it's a little different from some of the very early easements, but a lot of language is very much the same. And that includes a very important phrase which says that the burdened premises must remain in its natural state in order to maintain its present character and appearance. That's essentially the heart of scenic easements. And as I said, the power to accept scenic easements comes from General Municipal Law Section 247, which is really about protecting open spaces and scenic beauty. The two things what General Municipal Law says is that easements and other land accepted by the town under that provision. It's intended to protect open spaces and areas, and 247 of the GML defines those as 1, areas characterized by natural scenic beauty, or 2, areas whose existing natural condition would maintain or enhance the conservation of natural or scenic resources. The bottom line is this, and this, I think, informs the language that we're talking about within the scenic easement. It's intended to protect the natural character, the natural environmental quality, and the scenic beauty of the property. So when Dwayne Whelan was crafting the first scenic easements, he would not want somebody to be able to go in and, obviously you're banning structures within an easement, but you don't want someone to go in and be able to excavate and dig a hole. You don't want someone to be able to dump fill into a wetland. So you had language in there, and he put language in there that talks about the placement or removal of sand, peat, gravel, and other minerals. In this case, and I think in this regard, I'm in sync with the planning department. In this regard, the purpose of the sand plenishment is to maintain the bluff toe, replant it, basically to maintain it as near as we can in its natural state. So I think that is wholly compatible with the purposes of scenic easements, and therefore I do not think that the proposal is violative of either the 1991 or the 2007 scenic easement.
And I think, Rick, it might be good to also establish a time frame of when coastal erosion 2 was developed to rule that possibility out as well. Do we know what year that was established?
Coastal erosion, sorry, say it again.
Coastal erosion zone 2, right? I think it was after the first easement. So
yeah, the coastal erosion overlay district was adopted. Brian may know, but I'd say it was around 2005. It was as the town.
So in other words, my point being, I think that first easement wording wasn't considering that. So I think that might be an important thing to bring up here as well. That's all.
Well, point noted, but I will say this, the zoning board decision does not make any mention of that as a rationale.
No, I understand that. That's my point. I think that's my point.
Yeah. So anyway, bottom line is I'm in agreement with the planning department. I don't think that sand replenishment here is prohibited or even affected by the scenic easement. If I'm kind of anticipating that this application will be approved, especially since a similar application was approved in 2000 through an expedited NRSP process. I do have to point out that you're still working under COVID protocol. So if this hearing is closed tonight, we have to wait until the transcript is published and then another 2-week, formal comment period. That's going to probably take you, by the time you are in a position to decide, discuss and decide the application, you're probably going to be into early May or mid-May, and maybe the second, your work session in May. I have to emphasize, we're closed down. The beach is closed to us from about the middle of June. We need to get the sand, at least the sand on. And I assume that they can walk in with the, bundles of beach grass, but the sand requires vehicles. So when this is closed and when you have your opportunity to discuss this, it's very important that you act quickly, because we have a very short window if we're going to get the sand in at the base of the bluff in time to be able to plant it. So I needed to emphasize that to you.
Thank you.
With that, I'm open for any questions you may have.
Anybody have any questions for Rick?
I do not. I think that Brian Frank will have a pretty comprehensive comment on this.
I agree. Brian, you want to?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Brian Frank for the planning department.
You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Good evening, everyone. Hello, Rick.
Brian.
Rick's, you always get a history lesson from Rick, and I enjoy them. I agree with probably 97% of what Rick said in his presentation. The history of the easements are interesting. Very minor point. The lot was cleared in the 90s. That this plateau where the house eventually ended up was cleared before the Fabian Barron time.
I wasn't sure about that. I wasn't sure.
It's a very minor point. And I do think the expedited permit that was granted to the Evanses back in 2020 was issued in May. My understanding is that there may have been, and please feel free to correct me, Rick, but there was some, the whole COVID protocol was relatively new, and maybe that delayed implementation a little bit of the project. And
we have a record. We didn't receive that determination until June 10th.
Okay. I believe the date it was issued. I'm sorry about that, but
you're right. It was issued in May, Brian, but we didn't get it until June 10th.
All right. Sorry about that. That might have also been a product of our reduced workforce. We were on everybody remembers, I'm sure. But anyway, I don't want to belabor the past too much any more than is necessary. The past is kind of tied into this application, though. As Rick has pointed out, there's 3 prior applications on this property involving residential improvements. They all basically have said the same thing. They've all said that we are going to grant large variances from the bluff crest for our residents in this flat part of the property, basically for 2 reasons. One reason being that the rest of the property is so steeply sloped that construction in a conforming location involves grading and excavation in an area that could be actually deleterious to to the wetlands in particular. And I'm paraphrasing. You have a copy of the determinations. You can see the verbatim if you'd like. And the other reason was the perception, and it does use the strong language of basically no erosion on the property. And that's a pretty strong statement, and I'm going to come back to that. I do want to touch on the other applications that are technically in the board's file and theoretically open anyway, because they do reflect the applicant's concern from erosion about erosion really from the get-go. The most recent permit that was issued to Ms. Evans was issued in 2018, and as soon as 2019, while the house was under construction, there was an application submitted to the zoning board to alter the bulkhead and recap it. That application would require a variance from the Coastal Erosion Overlay District regulations, and it was kind of held in abeyance, put on the back burner while more traditional coastal restoration practices were pursued. Technically, the application is still open. There is also an application that was submitted a little bit more recently for 328 linear feet of geocubes, and that I think, especially in lieu of Rick's presentation about the purposes of scenic easements, that would not be consistent with the purposes of a scenic easement. That would require, you've seen the geocubes before, you know that they are structures, you know that they require excavation, but technically that is still an open application. And there is, besides this application, there is the reconstruction and extension of the staircase that was on a portion of which was on the property long before there were ever improvements there. And if anybody knows why those, and they're in the middle of the bluff, they never went up to the crest, they never went down to the beach. Maybe Rick knows something about it, but their whole presence was always a little bit anomalous because they don't go anywhere.
Well, all I can say is the first time I saw them, I had no interest in trying to walk on them.
Good call, because you would have ended up on the beach. They were not safe. And I do want to point out that the easement specifically does allow for the repair, construction, and presumably the extension of the staircase there. So the application that you're going to entertain in your work session is consistent with the easement. And those are the open applications. This is Albert's Landing Beach here to the south. You know that this is a low wave energy beach. It makes it very popular for families, especially small children. This is a great beach for toddlers where they can, they can play in the littoral zone without getting, swamped by a wave. And anytime after May, you're going to see this used by families. So it's really not surprising that the town would be reluctant, if not prohibitive, of allowing the parking lot to be used for access to the shoreline. The rest of the property, and you saw this in Member Brenneman's photographs, the rest of the property is very heavily vegetated, so there really isn't much access to the beach here. This is an oblique view of the existing improvements. This is from last year. This bluff is very heavily vegetated, except for the staircase. There's really no way to get down to this area here. Before I forget to mention it, I was never able to find a copy of the 1991 easement. So if one was filed, if Rick has a copy of that, I'd request that he submits it to the board. It's possible that we do have it in the town records, and the oversight in finding it is my own.
I do have a copy, Brian. I'll submit that tomorrow.
Thank you. Maybe its absence was part of the reason that it was reiterated. It's not always crystal clear when there are prior applications that have conditions associated with them, especially like the filing of an easement, when those are actually executed. So it's not uncommon to have them repeated. I'll mention that using conservation easements or scenic easements, whatever term of art you want to use, is a wide a longstanding and wide practice of both the zoning board and the planning board for decades, and it's easy to see why a natural feature like this would be recommended for an easement in development. The planning department does not have any objections to the applications. The placement of sand within the easement, I'm going to defer to the board about its eligibility. You've heard the planning department's opinion in the technical assessment. It was accurately paraphrased by Rick. We've had restorative applications and scenic easements in the past. And anyway, I'm going to defer to the board and their counsel about that. I do want to point out with regard to the implementation of the coastal restoration in 2020, I do think it was a waste of the applicant's resource to implement that in September. By the time you're in the end of summer, you're in the middle of our most volatile period of erosion. Planting beach grass in September is kind of futile. Obviously, it's not going to grow until the following year. Freshly placed sand doesn't have time to settle. The vegetation isn't going to hold it. You're in the middle of hurricane season and at the front end of nor'easter season. We want coastal restorations to be successful. We don't want applicants to waste their money. We don't want them to get frustrated and feel that what they're doing is futile. Obviously, the applications that the board has in their file are indicative of the applicant, the property owner's concern about erosion on the property. And I don't want to minimize that concern or be cavalier on the conditions on the property. But at least for the time being, I think it's fair to characterize the vulnerability of this property to erosion as relatively low. There's a huge volume of material between the house and the beach right now. The elevation of this bluff crest is more than 60 feet above sea level. It's over 140 feet to the area of the bluff, and maybe I should switch over to a photograph now, a site photo. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'd really like to show you a photo from last summer, because the conditions at that time, the conditions here were ideal for beach grass planting, and I would have very much liked to have seen the applicants address their concerns with or without the placement of fill. The conditions along this bluff face near the toe are ideal for beach grass planting. This is the right sediment, it's sand. This is a very doable slope. This photo, which was from last August, shows, this is what beach grass does. Beach grass is a pioneering plant. It's a colonizer. This was not a result of their coastal restoration. Some of that beach grass that wasn't taken away is at the top of their restoration here. Beach grass reproduces clonally. It sends out rhizomes. The roots go deep, so even if you lose some, you replace it. And if I'm not mistaken, in the reading of the code, the planting of beach grass without disturbing beach vegetation doesn't need a natural resources special permit. So I'm sure the applicants would prefer to do this by augmenting this sediment a little bit, but I would offer that that's not necessary for a good coastal restoration. And if time becomes a factor, I don't think it's a bad idea at all to get out there in late April, early May, and start putting beach grass plugs in here, 12 inches on center, to get that started. You'll see the beach grass on this property. You'll see green shoots start poking out through last year's dormant beach grass within a couple of weeks, especially if we get more weather like we had today. So I do want to just explain the conditions a little bit. It is disappointing to hear the frustration of applicants when they feel they've wasted significant amounts of money on something that failed, and maybe some guidance onto implementation is appropriate. I do think it's a little bit odd to have the sediment control in here And perhaps this is the Maresca Plan. This is what you're being asked to consider. It shows the location of the, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit. It shows the location proposed to place the fill. There's a little bit more exposure in the southern portion of the property than to the north. This purple area is, or this is the configuration of sand fencing they want to use, whether it's short individual rows or the zigzag that you tend to see more along the beach. I don't think it really matters very much. The point is that the fencing is going to baffle the sand, drop it out of suspension when the wind blows it, and it'll accumulate around the fence. But the sediment control here, there is some silt fence proposed along the seaward perimeter here. And I honestly don't think that's necessary. The sand is beach compatible. We're coming at the tail of storm season. Everything around it is unarmored. So if we did have a mid-spring storm that created some erosion, just keeping this amount of sand that's placed on the property out of the bay doesn't really do anything in the grand scheme of things. And it's just I don't know if it's a condition of the state permit, but it's an unnecessary expense, obstacle, and foreign material that I just don't think provides a real bang for its buck. I don't know if I've left anything out. I'm happy to answer any questions I can about the property. I've been there a lot since meeting with Rick and the property owners in 2019, I think it was. I do think that there are signs of erosion prior to Hurricane Sandy, from some of our oblique aerials. But I do think Sandy in 2012 did kind of shake things up here a little bit, did make a difference in the coastal processes. But again, I would respectfully characterize the erosion on the property as minor, manageable, and the structural improvements are really in no jeopardy. It's not in a flood zone. It's landward of the coastal hazard line. This is traditional non-structural restoration is the right way to manage this this section of shoreline into the future, and that's pretty much everything I have.
Thank you, Brian. Brian, could you just transfer to the aerial, if you will.
You want the overhead or the
overhead aerial? So, I mean, looking at, it seems like it was suggested earlier that the erosion is somewhat exacerbated by the deterioration of those groins. Is that your understanding of the escarpment that we're seeing in this aerial? Is because the groins are deteriorating, or
I would think
the groins to begin with?
I think it's a little bit more the deterioration of the bulkhead, if anything. And what you see in any one aerial is a product of a couple of things. And remember that I have the aerials here from 2001 through 2021. I could bring them all up. You'll see different levels of entrainment of the sand on the updrift side of the groins in any of the photos. But unless you know exactly the tide and the lunar cycle, you don't want to go too crazy, putting too much stock in and the groins are actually pretty functional. These are rock cribbed groins. They're timber along the perimeter. I think you might have even seen that from member Brenneman's photos, and rocks in the center. And they are relatively structurally intact. The same is not said about the bulkhead, which continues to deteriorate. Part of the coastal restoration that the property owners undertook was removing some of the jagged rebar, which was definitely a safety hazard. That was cut to grade throughout much of the southern portion of the property. A lot of it was left in the northern portion of the property for whatever reason. But I think the deterioration of the bulkhead may have more to do with changes along the shoreline than changes to the groins.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Board members?
I have no questions.
No questions for me.
No.
Can I offer a few comments then in response to Brian?
Sure.
Well, first of all, I think Brian and I are pretty much, largely in agreement on a lot of the factual issues here. I do think Brian's probably right. I think it was around Hurricane Sandy. I mean, one of the things I always remember about this bluff, going back, like I said, post 2000, and you can actually see that in aerial photographs if you go back, like say, to the 2001 aerials, that the woods really came right down to the bottom of the beach, which was pretty remarkable. I do think Brian's probably right. It's the deterioration of the bulkhead more than anything else over time that is kind of exposing the toe of the bluff more to wave energy. We know now that these structures are now over 70 years old, which is why the bulkhead is almost gone at this point. It's just kind of rack and ruin. The purpose of the silt fence, Brian mentioned the silt fence. One of the things that the clients have found, the applicants or the owners have found, is that sometimes they get, once when the sand has been there and so forth, sometimes people come, kids, dogs, whatever, they come along and they play in the area. So we're trying to, while the sand is growing, that I think is the idea, is to try to have sort of like, don't go inland at this line. Once the sand gets established, I think it would be not a problem to remove the silt fence. But the purpose of the silt fence, I think, is not so much obviously to prevent silt from going into Gardner's Bay. Brian's right, that's not really an issue, but sort of to tell people, hey, can you stay out of the growing area while it's established? We certainly agree with Brian on the timing of this, and as I explained, that's why we had specifically made a note when we received the town's administrative permit in early 2020. We saw, hey, the permit's dated May, whatever, it's like May 9th or something like that. And we didn't get it in the mail until June 10th. And so we made a note of that because it was too late to do anything. Madeline Norvillis, who works with me, was in contact with the town board at that time in terms of access to the beach. And, pretty much the town said, look, middle of June, we're going to have to shut things down. So I totally agree that the right way to implement this is to plant it, to put in the sand so you can plant it. It was very expensive for my clients to have to put in sand in the fall of 2020 and again in the winter of 2021. I don't know that they would regard that as a waste. I'm sure that they regret the money they had to spend to do it because it was all washed away, but it probably did help to prevent some erosion. I mean, some of the wave energy during those months in the fall and winter of 2020 to 2021 was expended removing that sand and kind of bringing it back to the original bluff. If had they not done that, I think erosion would have been worse. But certainly, we don't want to replicate that. We'd like to be able to plant. And Brian's right. Whenever you have the opportunity to plant, if you take it. So that's the idea, is to put this in and get beach grass on top of it. With regard, just one further comment with regard to the stairway. Member Brennan brought it up in the Brian River. It sounds like you may be talking about that in a work session. Because that was also applied for, I think, as an expedited permit. As I said, I will submit a copy of the 1991 Scenic Easement that does make provision for access to the beach, like a stairway or something of that nature. So there is no reason why the stairs can't be approved by you administratively. And the last comment I want to make, and I made that joke earlier about not wanting to go on the stairs when I remember seeing them because they just look so rotten. But my clients have noticed that sometimes kids from the beach have seen the stairs and tried to climb, have gone up them, and they were so unsafe to go on, which is one reason that the owners just put in stairs just so that it was not safe, even though it's not a permanent solution and we need your approval. But they didn't want some children going up the stairs and then breaking through the planks and getting hurt. So anyway, so hopefully you can see a way to approve those stairs without any further appearance by us. And in terms of this application, I have no further comments.
Thank you, Rick. At that point, do we have to go to is there anybody in the public, Matt?
You have 0 callers. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Rick, I think regarding the timing issue, I'm going to ask all involved that we do, as soon as the record closes, that we put it on the docket for discussion and decision. I think it is important, a timing issue on here. So
thank you, Mr. Chair. And look, I don't expect that we would use that 2-week period. No, we have no more submissions to make, so if you were able to make a decision after the transcript was published. I defer to you and your counsel on that, but obviously we'd like to get a decision as early as possible.
Thank you. All right. Tim?
Yes, so in the matter of Hillary Evans at 22 Broadview Road, Amagansett, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-104-2-29.1, I make a motion to close the public hearing and to keep the written record open until 2 weeks after the transcript is posted on the town website.
I'll second that.
I'll concur.
I concur.
I concur as well. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. All right, our next hearing is the Amagansett Presbyterian Society at 17 Meeting House Lane in Amagansett, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-171-05-02. The applicant is the Amagansett Presbyterian Society. The site location is 27,645 square feet, located at 17 Meeting House Lane in Amagansett. The description is to construct a 30 by 35 or 1,050 square foot brick terrace, a 6-foot high fence with plantings on both sides, an 8 by 7 or 64 square foot concrete dumpster pad, and an 10 by 18 or 180 square foot well pit to house a generator. The relief sought is a variance from a maximum allowed total lot coverage on the site by 991 square feet in order to accommodate the construction of the outdoor terrace, concrete dumpster pad, and generator well. Zoning district is B residence, Zone X, flood zone, secret class is type 2. Council, do we have proper affidavit of service and posting?
Yes, we have an affidavit of service and posting reflecting that both the posting and the mailing were done on March 4th, 2022, and the paperwork appears to be in order.
Thank you. Whose report is this?
This is mine, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I think Will's going to help me with some photos.
I'm gonna just right now.
Oh, okay.
That's weird. Hang on. It says I'm screen sharing.
There you go. You're on.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
Okay, this is actually not the very first photo, but I'll just take it from here.
Yeah.
You want to back up one? Can you? Okay. This is Scoville Hall, which is the property we're discussing tonight. This is standing in the road, looking directly at the building. To the right, in the bottom right-hand corner, you see 2 sticks. Those sticks have some staples in there, which indicate that the sign was on there. When I went over on Sunday afternoon, the sign was down. You'll see that I did find it. It does bring up an issue, Mr. Chair, about these postings going up and being put in a way that, although they may last, but they may not. I mean, we really should be insisting on a little better job of putting these in place. We run into this fairly often at this point. But anyway, there's where it was. You'll see the posting in a minute. We found the placard. Next. Here I'm looking down. I'm looking actually back up towards Montauk Highway. This is looking up Meeting House Road. Looking north. Next. Here I'm looking south down that road, a little blurry, but you can see that, yeah, the parking lots to my left that we're going to be looking at in a minute. We're looking down south towards the ocean, again on Meeting House Road. Next. I'm now looking at the north side of the building. Just to give you an idea of its size and scope, you'll see it again from the other side. Anybody familiar with Scoville Hall? It's a sizable structure that sits on a side street. Next. Here we're looking at it now from the opposite side on the south side of the structure. You see the parking lot, which is there to accommodate events, and you get a fairly good idea. You look towards the back, we'll see a structure that's off the property. Next. This is the official notice that was down on the ground. I propped it up and took a photo of it, that it was there on the site. However, it was not up on those stakes, as we sometimes find on these on our inspections. Next. This is around the rear, the east side of the building. This is the area that's been noticed as a petitioning for the patio that they're looking to install. This would be the area it would be. And there's some additional plantings and a 6-foot fence, which would be taking off from a near corner closer to where I'm standing here. And then moving down, more or less towards my right. Next. This is a shed that is to be removed from the site. This was part of a second proposal. At one point, there was a proposal to just relocate the shed. At this point, it's to be removed. Next. I'm standing here looking out almost directly where the proposed slab would be to accept a dumpster. That's out of line with the parking spaces, so that a truck could move in and pick it up easily. You can see that it's an open area at this point. To the right, we'll see in another photo, but to the right, there are 3 conduits that are coming out of the ground, and they've been put in at an approximate rear location of where this generator pit would be installed. Next. I just turned around to look back out again, give you an idea of the scope of where we are relative to Meeting House Lane. I'm standing more or less on the site of just behind where the dumpster would go, and to my left, as I'm looking, would be the generator pad, the generator pit. Next. I just wanted to make it clear where the generator sits. It would be sitting from those conduits closer to me, but basically in line the axis of the driveway. We have a house that's at a distance beyond vegetation. You can see the vegetation that's both on and off the property that separates it. In the summer, I imagine that it closes in pretty well. I think that's what I have, Will. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ed. Any questions for Ed?
No.
If not, I believe we have Rick still here. So Rick, I think this is your application as well.
Yes, it is, Mr. Chairman. Once again, Richard Whalen, this time with my landmarks hat on, representing the Amagansett Presbyterian Church. By the way, thank you, Member Joanne. He pretty much, Ed pretty much hit all the important spots, I think, with those photographs. First of all, a comment about the posting. The sign actually came down twice. It had come down before, I think, I remember Johan was out there on Sunday. I got reports from people around the church, and I was out in Montauk all day Sunday. When I came back, the sign had blown down for a second time. That was Sunday afternoon. I came back, went back to the office, got another sign, a fresh sign, and this time I just stapled the thing to the front of that tree. There's a big tree between the front walkway and the parking lot. It's very, very rough bark, but, I managed to get the sign posted, so I'm pretty sure that sign is still there. But yeah, sometimes it's difficult with these signs, and as you know, we had rain on Saturday and high winds on Saturday and Sunday, so the signs just they couldn't withstand it. So, but we did repost for a second time, so three different times the signs were posted. So I'm a member of the church. I'm also the clerk to the clerk of session. The session is essentially the board of directors of the local Amagansett Church. I will note, just for the record, I did submit a revised survey, an updated survey. I'll quote it to the boards yesterday. No substantive changes. I just wanted to, I noted that the planning department in its last planning board review had noted we didn't have a title on the survey. So the survey now has a title, and now the one you have up where it says proposed plantings, the updated survey labels that as proposed 6-foot privet. So those are the only changes. The only change really is we're indicating that the plantings will be a 6-foot high privet hedge. And that survey, just for the record, is dated March 10, 2022. So you have 9 copies of that. That's the very latest survey in the file. But again, there's no substantive change from what you had before. No changes to the coverage or anything else. By way of background, so Scoville Hall is the property of the Amagansett Presbyterian Church. The original building, which was called the Parish Hall, was built in 1925 on land that was donated to the church in 1924 by Mrs. Harry Hamlin. If you don't know who Mrs. Harry Hamlin was, she was a major figure in the town from the 1920s till the 1950s or so. She and her husband owned Stony Hill Farm on Town Lane in Amagansett, and she was involved in many, many philanthropic endeavors. In 1929, the church bought some additional property for Scoville Hall, created the lot that exists today. Now, of course, it adjoins on the Main Street side, it adjoins the manse, the minister's house for the church. The building was originally known as the Parish House. It was formally dedicated on March 19th, 1925. And in May of 1973, it was renamed and rededicated in honor of the Reverend Clarence Beecher Scoville, who was the minister of the church from 1919 to 1943. And he had passed away in 1972. So the parish house was renamed in his honor in 1973. The original building was severely damaged by fire on October 15th, 2011, and it had to be completely rebuilt. So the building that you see today is a modern building, not the original Scoville Hall, but a modern building on the same footprint. And that was opened in late summer of 2016. As both the parish house and then later known as Scoville Hall, the building has served for a wide variety of Presbyterian church functions and has also served the broader community. I will note that as the parish house, it was the official polling station for Amagansett, which at that time only had election district 3 from 1950 through 1963. The present application has 3 components to it. They are the outdoor terrace or patio, which you just saw a moment ago on the east side of the building. Then a small concrete pad for dumpster. There is a dumpster on the property right now, but it's off in the grass. And finally, a generator well or generator pit. Let me take those from the reverse end. As far as the generator pit is concerned, we're not actually proposing a generator at this time. We had donated one from many years ago. It's been in storage at Ben Krupinski Builders for some years. It's an old generator. It's probably very noisy. This came up at the planning board review, and the bottom line is it probably would be too noisy to use that generator, assuming the thing even still works. So we're putting that well into the future. Perhaps at some time the church would do a fundraising drive to get a modern, lower noise generator. And if it was installed, it would allow Scoville Hall to be used as a kind of a community retreat center in the event of a power outage in the area. So we do want to put in the generator well so it exists at the time, but there is no intention at the moment of putting in a generator, and we will not install a generator without the review of the planning board. The dumpster is self-explanatory. Again, we need a proper place to put the dumpster, hence the request for the dumpster pad. And finally, the outdoor terrace or patio, which is really the thing driving the application to begin with. It's directly outside what's called the tea room. The doors that Ed Johan was showing there on that side of the building exit from what we call the tea room, and that will enter onto the proposed terrace or patio. So the terrace will mimic the traditional uses that the church has had of Scoville Hall. Those are such things as outdoor Bible study, Sunday school, church fellowship, including coffee hour or lunches, following Sunday service, wedding receptions, baby showers, and the like. The tea room can be rented for private gatherings, all of which are approved by the church session. And obviously those private gatherings might also use the terrace. The church has used the grass outside there in the past. As recently as a couple of years ago, we had a lobster dinner out there with live music following the annual church fair. And I will note that the church has had an annual fair in August every year since 1914, except we had to stop in 2020. We did one in 2021, but 2020, because of COVID, unfortunately, the unbroken string of the church fair in August had to stop. So the variance needed is not, in my view, not very large in physical terms, amounts to, and let me just point out, there's only one variance sought here, and that's a total lot coverage variance. In straight terms, it's 991 square feet. In percentage terms, it's about 3.5%. We're increasing the maximum allowed total coverage, which we're barely under right now, to 53.58% of lot area. In terms of mitigation measures or ways to offset the variance, first of all, as Member Johan pointed out, we have an existing shed that's 12.5 feet by 20 feet. That shed is going to be removed from the property. So that offsets that you have the net number is what you have on our survey. So that accounts for the removal of the shed. We'll be putting in privet hedge 6 feet high around the proposed terrace and some adjoining lawn area. None of that requires architectural review board approval because it doesn't exceed, well, there's a fence within it, but that won't exceed 6 feet. It is not within the required front yard area. As I noted, all of these structures are offset from property lines as to meet the setbacks. There is no setback relief sought. We will need planning board site plan review for the for these structures. We've been before the planning board. We have to develop an outdoor lighting plan. So there will be a lighting plan developed and implemented in connection with the project. And that will, again, require planning board approval. And last but not least, just so that we have some real law to talk about here, I will let you know the legal constraints on your actions as a zoning board when dealing with a religious institution in New York State. I'm not going to provide you with case citations. If you want them, if your counsel wants them, I will provide some. But I think she'll be able to confirm in very short order that these are the basic governing rules when you're dealing with an institution and a variance. And this is what the cases say. First, while religious institutions in New York are not exempt from local zoning, greater flexibility must be used by reviewing agency in evaluating religious uses as contrasted with other uses. Second, every effort, and those words are often found in the case decisions, every effort must be made to accommodate the proposed religious use. And finally, the requirement that every effort be exerted includes a requirement that before a denial, and we're talking about variances here, not just special permits or site plans, even before the denial of a variance, the zoning board must suggest measures to accommodate the proposed religious use while mitigating any adverse effects on the community to the greatest extent possible. So, I think we've provided some mitigated measures that help to make this more, palatable, if you will. But overall, I think it's a very small variance. It does not make any substantial change on how the church has historically used Scoville Hall. And I think it's very clear that we meet the standards both under the town code and under New York case law. So if you've had any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions?
I do, Mr. Chair. Rick, you spent some time explaining the generator pit and then said, but you'll be going back in front of the planning board later. Are we being asked to approve the generator pit?
Yes, because we'd like to have the variance granted this time, but and there'll be a grading over the pit. But we will not install the generator without approval of the planning board. And I will admit that we have no current plans to do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
My question relates to that also. You're not getting a generator now, right, but even a modern generator makes a fair amount of sound, yet your plantings aren't going to go across that boundary to that house that we saw in Member Johan's photos. Is that something they could consider if and when they get the...
Yes, if we actually... Yes. Member Bird, if we actually were to install the generator, and again, we don't have the funding or the current intent or ability to do it. So that would probably be a fundraising project. That would be the issue of noise has already come up with the planning board. So we might have to baffle We might have to provide baffling to do that. It's an additional expense besides the generator. There's no time frame for doing that. It would be a good idea to do because it would make the building, independent of the grid in the case of emergency. But what we don't want to do is have to come back before the zoning board for a later, coverage variance to be able to put in the pit. The pit will be at grade level with a grade over it. So essentially it's, has no effect visually on the property. But we will not actually use it for generator unless we come back and go through a separate site plan review and get approval from the planning board.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Now we'll go to the planning department. What do we have?
That'd be me. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add to.
Hold on a second. Let me just swear you in. Do you affirm or swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have much to add to Richard's summary. He covered everything pretty comprehensively. As he said, they are removing the shed in order to bring that total lot coverage variance below 1,000 square feet, which it is. None of the proposed additions that are being, a factor in the variance are going to affect any view from Meeting House Lane. There's not really going to be any detriment, at least at this point, to nearby properties. So, and I reviewed this. I worked on the review of this for the planning board as well. And at the time when we sent comments to the zoning board, we kind of agreed that we had no objection to the variance. And as I've worked on this zoning board application, that I think that holds true mostly.
Thank you. Any questions, board members?
No.
No.
Matt, anybody in the public?
You have 0 callers. Thank you.
Well, thank you. All right. Ed, do you want to close us out?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, in the matter of Amagansett Presbyterian Society, 17 Meeting House Lane, Amagansett, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-171-05-02, I would like to make a motion to close the public hearing, but to keep the written record open until 2 weeks after the transcript for this meeting is posted on the town's website.
And I will second that.
I concur.
I concur.
I concur as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. We now go to our administrative application in our work session, and that is Hillary Evidence at 22 Broadview Road at Amagansett, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-104-2-29.1. And the description is to construct stairs down to the face of the bluff. Brian?
Good evening again, everybody. Brian Frank from the planning department. I'm going to borrow. Well, maybe before I do that, let me use the survey of the property. The property was improved with a 3x74 foot staircase that neither went all the way up to the top of the bluff or all the way down to the beach. Its presence is a little bit odd, but this is the property that we just discussed in the public hearing a little earlier. The scenic easement that's filed over the face of the bluff does allow for the repair and reconstruction of the staircase. It's really the most logical place for the property owner to obtain safe pedestrian access. It had been reconstructed and a little bit extended already, and that expedited administrative permits are limited to in place and kind. That's why this structure isn't eligible. I'm going to use member Bredeman's photo from a little bit earlier. This is the view of the staircase from the beach. Some work had been done.
Excuse me, Brian.
Yeah, we can.
We can't see what you're showing.
I guess it would help if I shared my screen before I started my presentation. My apologies. So this is the photograph from member Bredeman's presentation. This is a fair representation of what had been on the property. It has been a little extended towards the house a little bit. It's in the wooded section of the property. It does need to be altered a little bit to meet state building code. It does require a railing, and it does require landings. The most recent set of plans that we have received has a 3x3 landing, an average of every 17 feet. I haven't confirmed this with the building department, but it's my understanding that that will meet the state building code, and I'll confirm that before we proceed if the board is satisfied with that. The lowest section of the staircase is retractable. Here's a view in the, oh goodness, let me zoom out. I'm sorry. The retractability of the staircase is something I think we'd like to see on a number of properties. So this is the lowest section extended. This is retracted. We do tend to see coastal staircases become waterborne debris over the winter. They end up in fishermen pound nets. They end up slamming into other coastal structures. Getting them out of the way is a good idea where possible. We've seen aluminum staircases used in more properties to address that. And I was a little bit concerned about bringing this up for administrative review without the board being familiar with the history of the property, and that it just kind of it was a bit of a coincidence actually that they lined up this closely and you're discussing it in your work session basically right after you heard a hearing that discussed the history of the property in more depth. But that's the application. If the board members have any questions that I can answer, I'm happy to do that.
Board members, any questions for Brian?
Yeah, I have one, Mr. Chair. So I saw that staircase by visiting the site. It's fairly new construction, right? When do you think that was put in?
I believe it was reconstructed last year.
So it's one continuous run now. It's among the most frightening staircases I think you can witness, and it's going to be replaced, which means removing whatever work was done there at this time. Are you comfortable with that? We give them a building protocol because it is extremely steep, as you pointed out, and everyone else has. So this is going to take a little bit of work removing what they put in a year ago and then placing the new one in place, right?
Well, based on the work that was done the first time, there does seem to be, it is a heavily wooded bluff.
Yeah.
The understory is fairly open. It's a well-developed canopy, but there's not much of an understory. The initial reconstruction was done with what I would call a high level of sensitivity, lack of permit notwithstanding. If the replacement is done within the confines of the work that was done previously, the impact should be minimal. So based on that, yes, I am comfortable with it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody have any questions? I mean, I have no problem with this going administrative. Does anybody have any problems with it?
No, I don't either.
I don't have a problem.
Brian had called me early on about this, so I'd already reviewed it with him, so I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
I'm comfortable too.
I have no problem with it, Mr. Chair.
All right, Tim, you want to make a motion on that?
Sure. So in the matter of Hillary Evans at 22 Broadview Road, Amagansett, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-104-2-29.1, I make a motion to approve this application that it would proceed administratively.
And I will second that.
Concur.
I'll concur.
I concur as well. Thank you. One more item on our agenda, and that is the draft minutes of March 8th, 2022. Terry, you want to grab this?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think we're going to table them. There's a minor change that needs to be made on them.
Okay.
So if we could table that till next week.
For next week, sure. Okay, with that, that ends our work session and our hearings. Ed, Vice Chair, you want to close us out?
Right. Is there a motion pending?
Oh, yes, we do have a motion pending, Ed, and we want to maybe make it part of one motion to close the hearing and go into executive session for council to advise us on a application. Counsel, is that worded properly?
Yeah, what you want to do is, you're in an open meeting, so you want to make a motion to discuss potential litigation.
Right.
Okay.
Ed?
I would like to make a motion to close the East Hampton Town ZBA Zoning Board of Appeals meeting and to go into executive session to discuss possible litigation. The meeting of March 15th, 2022 at 8:54 p.m. and to go into executive session to discuss possible litigation.
Right, everyone.
I will second that.
I concur.
Concur.
Concur as well. Thank you.
Thank you.